Saigō Takamori was a samurai from the Satsuma domain, or modern-day Kagoshima. He was instrumental in the overthrow of the Tokugawa shogunate and later rebelled against the imperial government that he had helped to create. He is often referred to as Japan's last samurai. Saigō was born in 1828 in Kagoshima, Satsuma's capital. From boyhood, Saigō was distinguished by his unusual size and physique. A giant among his contemporaries, he appeared frightening at first glance, but he was friendly and unassuming in manner. After finishing school, Saigō began working in the local bureaucracy as an agricultural advisor. Shortly thereafter, he was promoted to the post of daimyo's attendant and accompanied his lord Shimazu Nariakira to Edo on Sankin Kotai, or the daimyo's alternate attendants, taking a 900-mile-long walk to the shogun's capital in Edo, where the young man would work as his lord's gardener, unofficial spy, and confidant. Soon, Saigō became Nariakira's closest advisor, but unfortunately, on July 15, 1858, Nariakira suddenly died, likely of poison. Saigō contemplated committing seppuku to accompany his lord into death, but a monk named Gesho convinced him to live and continue his political work to honor Nariakira's memory instead. The shogun began to purge pro-imperial politicians who supported Sonojoy, forcing Gesho to seek Saigō's help in escaping to Kagoshima, where Nariakira's half-brother Shimazu Hisamitsu unfortunately refused to protect the pair from shogun officials. Rather than facing arrest, Gesho and Saigō jumped from a small boat in the Kagoshima Bay and were pulled from the water by the boat's crew. Regrettably, Gesho could not be revived. The shogun's men were still hunting him, so Saigō went into exile on a small island on Amami Oshima. The domain government declared him dead. Other imperial loyalists wrote to him for advice on politics, so despite his exile and officially dead status, he continued to have an impact in Kyoto. 3 years after arriving at Amami Oshima, he was called back to Satsuma. A few months after returning to Satsuma, Saigō angered Hisamitsu after openly criticizing him. Saigō always believed that it was Hisamitsu who poisoned his lord Nariakira. This tension soon boiled over. Hisamitsu had him arrested and banished to a desolate penal island further south called Okinoelabu-jima, where he spent more than a year, before being pardoned and returning to Satsuma in February of 1864. Just 4 days after his return, Saigō was appointed commander of the Satsuma army in Kyoto. In the emperor's capital, politics had changed significantly during Saigō's absence. Pro-emperor daimyo and radicals called for an end to the shogunate and the expulsion of all foreigners. Saigō supported a stronger role for the emperor, but distrusted the rebels' rhetoric. Small-scale rebellions broke out around Japan, and the shogun's troops proved shockingly unable to put down the uprisings. The Tokugawa regime was falling apart, but it had not yet occurred to Saigō that a future Japanese government might not include a shogun. After all, the shogunate had ruled Japan for 800 years. As commander of Satsuma's troops, Saigō led an 1864 punitive expedition against the Choshu domain, whose army in Kyoto had opened fire on the emperor's residence. Saigō's massive army marched on Choshu, where he negotiated a peaceful settlement rather than launching an attack. A second punitive expedition was to be led against Choshu by the shogunate, but this time Saigō did not agree with the plans. Saigō and Satsuma Domain agreed to participate in the first punitive expedition to protect the emperor, but felt a second expedition would be excessive and was an attempt to enforce its control and power over another domain for its own selfish purposes as a way to re-establish Tokugawa dominance. Through a long and drawn-out process of distrust and negotiations, an agreement was finally brokered by Sakamoto Ryoma, bringing Satsuma and Choshu domains into a military alliance. This signed the fate of the shogunate, and after its failed attempt of a second punitive expedition, Shogun Tokugawa Yoshinobu knew his time had come. In November 1867, Yoshinobu tendered his resignation to the emperor and formally stepped down, returning governing power to the emperor. This led to the Boshin War between shogunate supporters and the imperial army, an army supplied mainly by Satsuma and Choshu domains. Saigō, as chief of staff, successfully negotiated with Katsukaishu for the peaceful surrender of Edo. He then directed a campaign against supporters of the shogunate in the north that lasted until November 1868. Instead of participating in the difficult problems of organizing a new administration, Saigō entered into retirement. In 1871, after much persuasion, Saigō finally agreed to join the government and was given command of the newly created Imperial Guard, consisting of some 10,000 troops. The next objective was to abolish the domain system and replace it with prefectures. Saigō was appointed to the Council of State and assumed joint responsibility with Kido Takayoshi for carrying out the new program. The change went smoothly and was followed by the disbandment of all domain troops. By the end of 1871, the government had eliminated all potential military opposition, and in the summer of 1872, Saigō was promoted to the new rank of full general. During this period, however, serious differences were developing over the question of introducing conscription. Some members of the government insisted that universal military training was a necessity. Others felt that it was unwise to deprive the samurai class of their ancient monopoly on warfare. While the debate raged, Saigō, the leading military figure in the nation, declined to commit himself publicly. It is known that he privately supported the plan, and there is a general agreement that without his encouragement, conscription probably would not have been adopted by the government. Saigō's inability to take a stand on conscription was perhaps an indication of a deeper uneasiness. Fearful that Japan was losing the samurai spirit, he was beginning to regret his part in having started an apparently irreversible process. During the summer of 1873, these emotions boiled over in connection with the problem of Korea. The Joseon dynasty in Korea refused to recognize Mitsuhito as an emperor because it traditionally recognized only the Chinese emperor as such. All other rulers were mere kings. The Korean government even went as far as publicly stating that by adopting Western-style customs and clothing, Japan had become a barbarian nation. Like many others, Saigō felt Korea's attitude was insulting and that Korea deserved punishment. A war with Korea would also have the advantage of reinvigorating the samurai, many of whom were sulking or rebellious over the trend toward modernization and universal conscription. In order to realize these objectives, Saigō argued in the Council of State for a unique plan. He would go to Korea as a special envoy, apparently to settle outstanding issues. While there, he would behave in such a way as to provoke his own murder, thus affording Japan unquestionable justification for a declaration of war. In October 1873, the Prime Minister announced that Saigō would not be allowed to travel to Korea as an emissary and rejected the plan. Furious at this decision, Saigō resigned as state councilor and commander of the Imperial Guard and returned once more to his old home in Kagoshima. Many members of the government followed Saigō's lead and also retired. A few months later, Saigō opened his own private school with emphasis on military science and physical training. Disaffected former samurai from all parts of Japan flocked to study under him. To Saigō, this was a simple private school that trained young men for public service. However, to the government in Tokyo, it was a cause for concern. The administration of the prefecture from the governor down was in the hands of Saigō's supporters, and graduates of his school were being preferred for new appointments. With samurai rebellions occurring in other parts of the country during 1876, there was real fear that Kagoshima might become the center of a serious insurrection. In an attempt to assert authority, the government took some ill-advised steps that only inflamed the already tense atmosphere, and on January 29, 1877, a group of Saigō's disciples attacked the Kagoshima Arsenal and Navy Yard. Saigō, who was in the mountains on a hunting trip, hastily returned. By the time that he reached Kagoshima, his supporters were operating the arsenal themselves to provide supplies for further military action, and Saigō reluctantly agreed to become the leader of their rebellion. Plans were made to march on Tokyo with the vague idea of presenting grievances to the government, and on February 15th, Saigō's army set their plans in motion. At this time, Saigō had no intentions on war or rebellion with the government. That was until government forces blocked his advance at Kumamoto. Then a full-scale war ensued for the next 6 months. Saigō's old friend Yamagata Aritomo, now Minister of War, became the field commander against him. By May, Saigō was on the defensive. During the summer, he suffered a series of disastrous defeats, and by September the situation was hopeless. With a few hundred men, he returned to Kagoshima to make his last stand at Shiroyama, a hill overlooking the city. On September 24th, 1877, the government troops launched the final attack at the Battle of Shiroyama. Saigō was critically wounded, and one of his faithful lieutenants took his life by beheading him. In the end, the conscription army had defeated the samurai. Never again would the government fear local uprisings or samurai threats. If the great Saigō Takamori could not win, no one else would be foolhardy enough to try.